All right, so like Matt said, I'm going to present on mobility and stability specifically as it applies to performance prep, okay? So first and foremost, we're going to define what mobility and stability is. And as Matt said before in his presentation, I want to make this extremely dynamic, okay? For the next 60 minutes, I don't want to be talking all the time, okay? So please ask questions, all right? I'm going to ask you questions, and the first question I'm going to ask you is to define mobility. Okay, we got these great whiteboards up here. Okay, if y'all were to please shout out keywords, definitions that you may have or that you use. Okay, we want to understand what mobility is first and stability is first before we can move on. So anybody, shout out whatever you want.
Range of motion.
Range of motion. Okay, so if we talk about mobility, the first thing that you're going to think of, right, is a range of motion. Okay, what's another thing you think of as far as mobility? Probably the primary thing, right? But what else do you think about? Anything? Movement. Okay, exactly. All right. So a lot of times with mobility, we think about just like this, right? Get my shoulder warmed up, right? From that little kid from the NFL commercial, right? I have mobility in my shoulder, right? But it's about movement. It's about movement patterns, okay? And as we'll see during the presentation, it's not just mobility. It's mobility in conjunction with stability. You got something up there?
I was going to say movement around the joint.
Sure. Right. So in addition to that, movement about a joint, what we'll talk about too is correct positioning of this movement, okay? It's not just a range, okay? It's what sort of range are you traversing in that joint, okay? Is it a good range, all right? Is it proper positioned in that range? Is the joint properly positioned in that range or throughout that range? Okay. So a couple key words, perfect. All right, so my definition, all right? Okay, I cheated, I looked in a book, all right? But degree to which an articulation where two bones meet, right, is allowed to move before being restricted by surrounding tissues. Those surrounding tissues being ligaments, tendons, muscles, etc. Okay, so when we think about mobility, it's not just thinking about, okay, we're moving a joint, all right? Is it restricted? It could be a bony restriction. It could be ligaments, tendons, muscles, etc., okay? So this mobility work that we do will sometimes also involve elements of flexibility, elements of stretching, things of that nature, okay? Next, stability. What do we think of? Looking for probably one really key word on this one.
Motor control.
Okay, good. Strength, control, okay? That was the big one. Control, it makes the mat even better. We have motor control. I'm trying to spell stability here. Okay, control. Okay, strength even too, all right? Of course, we need to have strength to be able to stabilize, okay? Strength in a certain way. Okay, so definition of stability. Ability to maintain or control joint movement or position. Now that we know what mobility and stability are, all right, we need to know what joints of the body we need to mobilize and what joints of the body that we need to stabilize, okay, primarily, all right? What we're going to go over is something called the joint-by-joint approach, all right? Now, the joint-by-joint approach, as we go over it, if you're familiar with it, fine, okay? If you're not, it's an easy way to kind of hammer home this concept. It's an easy way to memorize during your mobility or stability work and your performance prep what joints you should be mobilizing and what joints you should be stabilizing. So, first, mobility, okay? The first joint we're going to look at is the ankle. All right, we're going to start at the bottom of the kinetic chain. Okay, we could elaborate on this for days. We could start at the big toe, which is, of course, also important as well. Okay, if we don't have mobility in the big toe, we're going to be, pretty messed up the kinetic chain as well. But starting at the ankle exhibits mobility. Okay? If we move up the kinetic chain, the next joint is the knee. Okay, that next joint is going to exhibit stability. Okay, so we have stability at the knee. All right? Move up the kinetic chain to the hip, mobility at the hip. Okay, so you see the theme here. We are alternating between mobile and stable joints. Okay, so it's kind of easy to remember, right? Lumbar spine next. Okay, which will be key in this presentation. Okay, I loved how Matt throughout his presentation talked about it is so technique driven, right? The program is so technique driven. In our performance prep, as I'll talk about, that's a perfect time to hammer home and set the tone with your athletes to say that this is what the expectations are as far as how you should set your position, how you should move, okay? During our mobility and stability program, that's where we can set that tone. A big part of that during the presentation is going to be about that lumbar spine, about our core, okay? Next up, thoracic spine exhibiting mobility. After that, your scapulo-thoracic interaction exhibiting stability. Okay, as we know, that interaction also has to exhibit what? We have to have some sort of rhythm, we have to have some sort of mobility as well. So primarily that joint wants to be stable, but it also has to demonstrate mobility, okay? And I'll go through that in the presentation as well, okay? The difference between that demonstration and then the characteristic of that joint. Glenohumeral joint is mobile, elbow is stable, wrist is mobile, okay? So if we understand that and we're developing our mobility and stability program, this is a good base kind of for us to look at as we develop that program. It's kind of like your intensity sheets if you use that for your program, okay? How many reps can I get at 85%? Boom, you know, you kind of use that as your rubric, okay? So the problem with mobility is that it doesn't speak to motor control, right? What we want to end up looking at is a combination of both mobility and stability. They need to coexist with each other. We can't really have one without the other to have success in athletics. From a programming standpoint, we may program one and work on one for a certain amount of time, and then work on stability. You know, some of us may have heard the concept of mobility before stability, of course. But when we get into athletics, we need to have them working in conjunction, those two training qualities, okay? So to explain this concept, okay, we're going to go through what's called joint centration, all right? Now, joint centration is a concept that is developed, and I'll talk about it in the next slide as well, developed by people that are much smarter than I am, much smarter than probably most of us are as strength coaches, okay? And talking about physical therapists, athletic trainers, okay? People that dive into this a little more deeply. But as public sector strength coaches or private sector, if you're working with clients, we should have a little bit of understanding of what joint centration is, because I think it's very beneficial to add into our programs conceptually. Okay, when we're thinking about our programs, we should think about the development of an ideal degree of articulation throughout all planes of joint movement, in combination with the ability to optimally stabilize and control this available motion. So it's not just, like I said in the beginning, it's not just about mobility, it's not just about stability. Okay, in conjunction, they have to work in conjunction with each other. Okay, so there's an ideal position for this joint, right? There's an ideal position, okay, for my glenohumeral joint. There's an ideal position for my humeral head and my glenoid fossa, right? Okay, there's an ideal position for that. All right, we can train that. We can cue our athletes during our mobility and stability work to allow for that good mobility and stability work to happen. Okay, like Matt said in his presentation, you're not going to be wowed by the exercises. Okay, it's about emphasis of how these exercises are being carried out. Okay. So this picture here I'd like to include. This is floating around probably the social networks. I've seen this been posted a ton on Facebook. But it's a phenomenal picture, right? Because we see this all the time, okay? You know, for those of you who may have kids or you see kids running around, this kid can perform a perfect squat. And my supposedly high-level Division I athletes don't know how to squat, you know? So this kid, you know, I'm not cueing this kid. I'm not like, all right, buddy, you know, you got to squat a little parallel. You know, we're going to get a little kettlebell on you. Like, you know, he didn't get cued to do that, okay? That's a movement pattern neurologically that's ingrained in us. Okay, when we come out of the womb, we're ready to roll. Okay, maybe not right out of the womb, but you know, hopefully this kid's like 3 years old or whatever. But you know, so he's in a perfect position. We look at his head position even, which we have to cue so much for our athletes. Okay, you may have heard of packing the neck, you know, neutral spine, whatever it may be. We cue so much to get an athlete in this position, or we work so much to get an athlete in this position. Now, why don't we have the ability to get in these positions anymore? Whole nother conversation, right? Sedentary lifestyle, whatever, bad postural habits, whatever it may be. But I think the point of this presentation is giving you strategies, okay, to allow for this to happen again with your athletes, okay? How can we allow our athletes to demonstrate this type of good movement again, okay, if they can't already, or maintain this good movement throughout their time with you, either your clients or throughout your time with the athletes in college? So to elaborate a little more, I'll go through this quick because I think I touched on most of this stuff. All right, so I got this concept mainly from a physical therapist named Charlie Weindrop. These points specifically I got from a guy named Dr. Evan Ozar. Big YouTube guy. Look up some of his videos. He's got good stuff on there. So, just like most of us, we steal stuff from other people, exercises, concepts, whatever. But I learned it from his DVD. It's called Training Equals Rehab, Rehab Equals Training. So definitely Charlie Weingroff, look up that DVD. It's a valuable purchase. So that's where I learned this concept, and it involves, again, an optimal axis of rotation, okay? We want to work on stability statically and through dynamic movement, okay? So it's not just about stability in one position. I may be stable here, okay, but am I stable as I start to move? Okay, am I exhibiting those characteristics through dynamic movement as well? Okay, is that joint in a good position through, when I have a pitcher throwing 90 miles an hour, is that joint being controlled, and is it being controlled in a good position? Okay, deep stabilizers work to keep the joint centrated. What I want to talk about here is we all have those athletes or clients that come in and they don't know how to activate certain muscles, right? Certain athletes come in, they don't know how to activate their glutes or, pertinent musculature that we need to stabilize a joint, okay? So we can have an athlete come in, they could squat a house, they're clean and well, they're powerful, strong dudes, but those prime movers are pulling on those joints, and we pull that joint into knees and hips into extension, and there's a ton of force going on, but what happens when you get into extension? Are you in control, okay? Are there muscles that are being activated that allow that athlete to control that movement? Maybe they've gotten away with it, okay, up until now, but you get that athlete on the field, okay, high-level competition, they're moving with so much force and so much power, okay, what are we setting that athlete up for? Okay, potentially an injury, right? Okay, because they can't control the force and power that they produce, all right? So if we preach that in our mobilization and stabilization program, okay, we teach them to activate those certain musculature, we set the joint in a good position, hopefully we can have a little bit more success, not only in their sport, but in the training as well. Okay? Last concept is the ability to effectively dissociate. Okay, now what do I mean by the ability to effectively dissociate? What do you think that means?
What comes to mind immediately, you tell an athlete doing RDL, injured the hip, you see them bending at their knees a lot. And
Okay.
Disassociate
For sure.
hip flexion.
Yeah. Anything else? Anything else that you guys think of? Okay, and that's a part of it, right? If you can, I'll give you an example, a different example, a unilateral example. If I go into a lunge position, okay, I step into that position, I'm looking for my femoral head to interact with that hip in a certain way without restriction, okay, and not draw movement from where? If somebody can't effectively dissociate, what are you going to see? So, go ahead.
They're going to be bending over at the waist.
Sure, they're going to be bending over. They might be flexing at their lumbar spine because coach said, hey, you've got to get this depth. You have to get in this position. But the athlete couldn't, but they said, well, coach, I got to get this depth some way, somehow. Neurologically, my body said, well, all right, what do? Okay, flex at the lumbar spine. I'm compromising the integrity of the movement. Okay, posturally, things fail. That it's not a good situation. Okay, so joint centration involves, in a programming standpoint, developing our ability to effectively dissociate. Okay, so first example here with a ton of videos. Okay, so a push-up example or push-up precursors. Okay, so these are certain things that, not necessarily progression, but certain exercises that I'm going to use with my athletes to allow them to do a push-up. I do women's sand volleyball at USC. So you have freshman girls coming in that are 6'2", never seen a weight room in their lives, and I think it's a valuable thing for them to be able to do a push-up. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do possibly would be to get them into this bird dog position. Now, what do you notice? If we're going to talk about joint centration and the theme of the presentation, mobilizing and stabilizing in a good position, what do we notice about this portion of the movement? From a joint-by-joint approach, what is adhering to the joint-by-joint approach? Stable what?
Stable thoracic.
Stable thoracic, okay, so we say thoracic the characteristic of the thoracic spine is mobility, but you're right. You're right, stable lumbar, but the thoracic spine as well, okay, because I said in the beginning, right, the characteristic of the thoracic spine is mobility, okay, it's going to, predominantly, exhibit mobility, but it has to demonstrate stability as well, okay, but lumbar spine as well, okay, so a big part of what we do mobility and stability-wise is in the closed chain, Okay, so I'm putting an athlete in positions where they're planted on the floor, okay, whether a hand, knee, foot in this case. We're stabilizing in one area while we're mobilizing in another area. Okay, so on the left side, what do I have to do with my shoulder? At the glenohumeral joint, okay, in the scapulothoracic region, I have to stabilize. Okay, and I have to stabilize in a good position. So what I'm trying to do, it's not the easiest thing even for myself, but to protract on that left side. Okay, I'm trying to activate pertinent musculature. Okay, serratus anterior, pec major, pec minor. Okay, so I'm stabilizing my ass off on the left side. Trying to press as hard as I can. Okay, once I get into that position, then I can begin the movement. All right. So, next part of the movement, bird dog. We all know what it is, right? Okay. Simple movement, right? You're not going to be wowed by the exercise, but what's happening here? What did I say? What am I going to say to my athletes about this part of the movement? Am I going to say touch elbow to knee? No, I'm going to try to avoid that as much as I can because the goal orientation is important. It's not about touching elbow to knee. It's about attempting to go through a safe range of motion in a good position. Okay? So if I can't touch my elbow to my knee, and if I try to do so, I start flexing at the lumbar spine or I start compromising the integrity of the thoracic spine. What is that movement worth? Okay, we're not actually mobilizing or stabilizing what we think we're doing. Okay, so that's as far as I'm going. All right, and that's as far as I'll tell my athletes to go. If I see them go any further and say, "Hey, coach, I touched my elbow to my knee. I'm really mobile." Well, no, you compromise the integrity of the movement. That's not the way to do it. Educate your athletes. Okay, let them understand the real goal. That the goal is not to touch elbow to knee. Okay, hopefully it's only one more rep. Okay, next exercise. Can we get into a push-up plank position? Do we know how to protract? I'm stable in the lumbar, I'm stable in the core. We'll talk about breathing as well as being part of that stability. Okay, when we stabilize, a lot of the work happens, or if we work on joint centration, a lot of the work happens eccentrically. So if I'm utilizing the TRX here as one example of an exercise, can I control this eccentric movement from a shoulder flex position eccentrically down in, so, my hands in front, or as I eccentrically extend at my shoulder. So maybe I'm cueing the athlete 3 or 4 seconds down. I'm not worried about the concentric because my concern is how can you control the movement? Part of joint centration. I'm setting my position and then I'm controlling that good shoulder position. Okay? Push-up plank top position. Do I have an ability to hold that simple position before I even get into a push-up? Push-up plank bottom position. I'm in a good position and controlling that good position. Okay? Last exercise. After probably those planks and protraction and things like that, I could get into a push-up. All right. Wanted to show an example at the end of something a little more complicated. Your athlete can do a push-up. And a more advanced mobility stability exercise that you can then move on to is something called a T push-up. You've probably seen this before. All right. Plank position, push-up plank. All right. But what am I doing? On the left side again. Talking about closed chain exercise. I'm planted on one side. And then I'm opening up or mobilizing on the opposite side. So I have to be stable on the left, joint is centrated on the left, shoulders in a good position, I'm activating. On the right side, I'm opening up, I'm mobilizing the thoracic spine and keeping the lumbar spine stable. Okay, we go, probably see a little bit better on the opposite side here. So mobilization while stabilization is happening as well. Okay? So now, moving on from joint centration to pure stability. And what I want to talk about with stability is force production. So if we don't have stability, what's going to happen? From a kinetic chain standpoint, right? We're educated on the kinetic chain. We hear that term a lot. All right, so if I produce force into the ground, see it on the slide already, but if I have instability in an area that needs to demonstrate stability, what's going to happen with that kinetic chain? Okay, that instability is going to break the kinetic chain. And what's going to happen to that force production? Okay, that force production is going to decrease. All right, we know from our time in physics. Okay, for some of you, okay, we're going to produce force into the ground. Hopefully, we're getting an equal and opposite reaction. That force is coming up through the kinetic chain. Hopefully, once it gets to the area, say I'm a baseball player and I'm going into a swing. Okay, I'm loading up that right side. I produce force into the ground. It comes up the kinetic chain. Once that bat hits the ball, hopefully, I'm getting the same amount of force that I produced through my foot. If I have some sort of instability, maybe at the knee, maybe at the lumbar spine, and I can't transfer force efficiently, okay, I'm not going to get all that force back, right? Okay, so when we develop our stability program, we want to consider activation, okay? Allowing these athletes to learn how to activate certain musculature that's going to allow them to stabilize, right? And we have to cue that, okay? That has to be cued. It's not going to happen naturally. Okay? A lot of these athletes, a lot of us don't know how to activate certain muscles, all right? We have to own the movement. Another phrase that I got from Charlie Weindrop, okay? Again, like Matt said, give credit where credit is due, okay? So he talks about owning the movement, and I like this phrase because movements involve so much more than just, I'm lunging and I'm keeping good posture, okay? Or, I'm squatting and, okay, you kept a neutral spine or whatever. You kept your neck packed or whatever, okay? There's so much other things that we can coach, okay? We can coach breathing. We can coach breathing over, if we're in an isometric hold, breathing over that hold. We're in a compromised position. Are we cueing the athlete and saying, some meathead terms that we're getting after, da-da-da-da? Okay, that's a part of it too, but cueing that athlete to breathe in that compromised position. That's truly owning the movement, okay? And then, of course, at the end, breathing properly as well, which we'll talk about more. So, understanding the anatomy, understanding what we're talking about before we get into programming, okay, the biggest thing that I'm going to preach, all right, is setting the position before you get into the movement or before you get into the stability exercise, whatever it may be. The correct position must be established prior to commencement of the mobilization or stabilization. This allows for the improvement to be made at the targeted area. So like I touched on before, all right, if we don't understand, number one, the joint-by-joint approach, and we go into a mobilization exercise and we tell an athlete to touch their toes or we tell an athlete to reach for a certain spot, okay, and they get there, okay, but we didn't look at their lumbar spine or what was happening at the hip or the alignment of their knee, okay, maybe they got there but they compromised the movement, okay, they didn't set their position before getting into the movement. Okay, we may have wanted a stable thoracic spine as we mobilized the shoulder. That stability wasn't there. They think they had mobility, but they actually were drawing that mobility from the thoracic spine. Okay? So we need to avoid involvement or compensation through utilization of unwanted joints or muscles. Okay? So the athlete must understand the goal. I touched on this before. Okay, don't say touch your toes, say stretch your hamstrings in this position. Okay, and here's the example. Okay. So this will be an easy one. Okay, what am I doing? I touch my toes, right? Athlete's going to be like, Coach, I'm so flexible, man. I touch my toes. I guarantee you, when I do this on the turf, if I'm going to do it like this and there's athletes around, they'll be like, oh, Coach, you're so flexible. How do you do that? How do I get there, man? My hamstrings are so tight. Is that true flexibility? No, I'm compromising the targeted movement. What's flex? Lumbar spine. What else? Glenohumeral joint. I'm reaching, I'm compromising the joint centration at my shoulder to reach my toes. Where, as a part of your flexibility program, if you say touch your toes, or if you have a flexibility or a hamstring flexibility exercise in your program, why not cue it like this? We set a good position, our head's in a neutral position. I tell my athletes, slide your hands down the front of your thighs for as much of a distance as you can in a good position. Okay, beyond that distance, I'm going to start compromising the integrity of the movement. Okay, so that's the demonstration of true flexibility. Now, get into breathing really quickly. Okay, we could have a whole lecture on breathing, right? Okay, but a couple slides here just to drive the concept home. Now, what I want to talk about this slide is not spinal conditions or issues we have. What I think this picture shows is kind of what we see when we tell our amateur athletes or our novice athletes to get in good postural position, right? Okay, they don't know what that is. Okay, we may see an athlete and we may say, all right, let's get into a dumbbell supported row, and they're like this, and they're like, oh, Coach, I got 90s here, man, I'm killing it, okay? And they're not, right? They're not in a good postural position, okay? And you say, correct the position, and you say, arch your back. What are they going to do? Oh, it's an arch, right? Okay? That's an arch, right? That's what they think of, okay? Or they say, this is good, right, Coach? And sometimes, as strength coaches, we say, okay, yeah, that's good, okay? Or they're rounding their shoulders, or they're messing with their neck, okay? So I think this just shows kind of the things you see when you tell an athlete, flatten your back, fix your posture, okay? We have to cue them in the right way, and that starts in our performance prep. That starts with our mobility and our stability exercises. So when they get into their heavy hitter type exercises, they know what they should be, or they know the postural positions that they should be in, okay? So if we tell an athlete, the one I want to focus on is lumbar lordosis, okay? We tell an athlete to fix their posture and they do this. We see athletes all the time, okay? If you do any sort of investigation, if you have any sort of classes or education, okay? Predominantly we see these athletes in anterior pelvic tilt, right? Okay? Which causes this lumbar lordosis here. It causes this hyperextension, okay? Kind of sticking their butt out, all right? Causes what? We got tight hip flexors, we're in turn causing tightness in the hamstring, all right? It's not a good situation. So why would we want to exacerbate that problem, okay, by utilizing that position in our training, okay? We see rounded back. We know rounded back's a bad position, but that's a bad position too, okay? And how do we get out of that position? Cueing them in a way that includes breathing, includes muscle activation to get them in spinal neutrality, okay? Lumbar neutral, okay? Pelvic neutral, thoracic neutral, because that's not neutral. That's hyperextend. That's a false stability. If I get in this position, what am I causing? Okay? There's pain in that position because we're crushing our discs, we're crushing our vertebrae together, okay? It's a false sense of stability. Okay, so we're breathing properly. And how are we doing that? Diaphragmatic breathing. So when we breathe in, cue the athlete in yoga, they cue you to breathe down and wide. We want to breathe down into your belly, right? Okay? We don't want to see any movement at the chest. We don't want to see any movement at the upper trap. Okay? So when we get into these certain drills with the athlete or certain mobility exercises or stability, or even maybe you do breathing drills, okay? Cueing them the right way. They could be in a plank position. They could be in that bird dog position, okay? When you're owning the movement and you're stable, can you breathe over that brace? Can you breathe properly? Okay? And that's where diaphragmatic breathing comes into play. Because then when you get into that heavy deadlift and you set your position, what are you going to do first? You're going to take a big breath in, stabilize your thoracic spine, lumbar's neutral, and you're ready for the movement. Okay? Next concept we're going to talk about is demonstrating versus training a movement. So movements considered anatomically unwanted can and are frequently demonstrated without injury. All right, so what do we see in this picture? Again, like I said, a lot of the conversation is going to revolve around lumbar flexion, or lumbar spine. Okay? As a strength coach, I'm not going to run out to the field, before this guy does a backflip and is blind to the goal and trying to, slam this ball into the back of the net. I'm not going to be like, hey, dude, before you get into that movement, set your lumbar spine, set your postural position. Okay? It's not going to happen, right? And that's fine. Okay? Because when we get into athletics, we should have the ability to demonstrate that movement. Okay? Because it's in an uncontrolled environment. When we're in a controlled environment, when we're training, okay, we have the ability to kind of adhere to the anatomical concepts, biomechanical concepts that are, going to keep the athlete safe. Okay? So hopefully when they get into this movement and they demonstrate lumbar flexion, and he falls to the ground and he scores a goal and he's running back to the sideline to celebrate, he got out of that movement, right? He fell to the ground, he hopped up. The key was that he was able to get out of that movement, and now he's in a good position again, okay? If we didn't do that sort of controlled training, this guy maybe not have been able to get out of that movement, or he was injured on that play, or he could have been injured on that play, okay? So we set these good positions, and we train these good positions in a controlled environment, so hopefully they can demonstrate these bad positions, but then get out of them. But we do not want to train anatomical movements that are unwanted, all right? So we can all agree on, as strength coaches, that the kid on the left is performing a deadlift, and it's not good, right? Okay, we can all agree on that. And I see everybody, shaking their heads like, terrible deadlift. I would never let my athletes do that, right? Okay, as strength coaches, sometimes we think, or we know everything, right? We're reading all these books now. We're online. We're on every blog in the world. Okay, every PT, I know every PT's name in the country that's involved in strength and conditioning. Okay, I'm writing stuff online, okay? And you know that that's a bad deadlift. But when the music's on, and you got 30, 40 athletes in your room, or you're with your client, and you're amped up, and you got an open set, or you're testing, on a testing day or whatever, are you going to stop that athlete on rep number 3 and 4 when he's got 20 football guys around him screaming in his face that he can get another one, okay? Did you set the tone in your performance prep? Okay, did you set the tone as far as stability and mobility, what was expected from that athlete in your performance prep, for that athlete to know, even if I stop him and he's pissed, the best question I could get from that athlete, and that I've gotten before, and when I knew that the athletes were buying in, was like, oh, coach, was I rounding my back? Okay, because he got it. He knew what he did wrong. Okay, was he pissed that he couldn't get it? Yeah, but it was pissed because he couldn't get it, not because I stopped him. Okay, he rounded his back, disappointed with that. Okay, so a big part of this is, again, coaching intensive, okay? As Matt said in his first presentation, be coaching intensive. That's why you're on the floor. Your program's not going to carry out itself. You could have the best, you hear it all the time, you could have the best mobility, stability, strength, power, speed program in the world, but if you don't carry it out the right way, or if you accept things like this, okay, you're going to have problems, all right? The guy on the right, okay, we're all guilty of it. We hit those Russian twists like it's no tomorrow, right? Okay, yeah, I'm guilty of it too, man. My Gold's Gym days back in Enfield, Connecticut, in that basement, man, I was killing Russian twists, all right? I'd do 50 on each side before I even got into my leg, all right? So what sucks is we apply these exercises because we see them in their age-old exercises and they've been done for forever. But because we understand the joint-by-joint approach and we're educated, we understand joint centration, unwanted movements, okay? We may take this out of our program, okay? We as strength coaches should be able to tell this kid or one of your athletes that comes up to you and say, hey, coach, I want to do Russian twist today. Is that a good exercise? And he loves Russian twists. And I can turn to him and say, hey, try this exercise, okay? Like, oh, but those Russian twists, really burn up my abs, my low back. Oh man, I'm getting good work out of the Russian twist. Okay, I can come up with something better. Okay, as a strength and conditioning professional, I should be able to come up with something better. He's going to feel good after whatever exercise that I choose for him. Okay, it's going to be anatomically correct. It's going to be safe for him. All right, and he's going to come back and be like, oh wow, that was awesome. Okay, we should be able to come up with something better than that, right? So, talked about it, the underlying theme throughout the presentation. The performance prep is a great time to be extremely particular. We're in a controlled environment. When I have my athletes come in, I do baseball, I do men's track, and I do women's sand volleyball. Baseball and track can be pretty huge, especially in the fall. Track can have maybe 50 kids, okay? So how am I going to carry out a mobility and stability program, okay? I need to control the environment. A lot of times, it's only me as the coach, all right? One strength coach to 50 athletes. Okay, or a lot of times we don't have interns, but we may have 1 or 2 interns, okay? If that's the case, then you're in a better situation. You can change up the environment a little bit. But you have to figure out some way to control it, okay? You can't have 4 to 5 groups bouncing around the weight room and you standing in the middle and expect to be able to cue all these guys, okay? I'm willing to knock out 3 or 4 exercises and do only 2 or 3, okay, my mobility and stability program for the day, okay, if that's how I'm going to control that environment, okay? If I need to line them up, if we need to take our time, all right? The intensity is low. Most of the time in our mobility stability program, in our warm-up, we're just utilizing body weight, right? Or maybe a band or whatever it is. That allows for a high chance of improvement, okay? So these kids don't know the movement, okay? You're trying to cue them up, but it is a low intensity, so they have a chance of actually getting the concepts. So our expectations are set before the load is introduced, okay? We set our expectations, they know what's going on before we tell them, okay, here's 120 kilos, pull it off the ground, catch it deep in the hole, okay? They need to know what a good position is before you get into that movement. Okay, so what are our goals? All right, we're going to move into a bit of assessments really quickly. What we want to do with our mobility and stability program when I'm developing it, okay? I want to improve trouble areas previously determined through assessments or injury profile. I consult with my athletic trainer. Maybe my athletic trainer does some assessments as far as range of motion measurements. Okay, maybe we go through some sort of objective assessment. I'm not going to pitch an assessment to you, a specific one, but what I do believe is that you should have some sort of objective assessment with your athletes or with your clients, okay? So you can track their progress, all right? So whether it's, a range of motion number, whether it's a score, okay? Just simply so you can track some of their progress, all right? Prepare the athlete for subsequent training session, okay? So we call this performance prep, but, what is that a fancy word for, or phrase for, is your warm-up, okay? The athlete needs to be warmed up, okay, before they get into the training session. So sometimes we do a mobility and stability program, we've got a couple movements, and I say, okay, here's your hip mob, your ankle mob, and your scap wall slide. All right, ready to go? No, you're not, right? So we need to develop our program in a way that allows the athlete to be warmed up for the training session as well, all right? Improve the athlete's ability to perform sport-specific movements. Okay, a lot of that kind of transitions in to our dynamic warm-up as well, but our mobility and stability program, as far as lunge movements, squatting movements, should say, prepare to perform human movement, basically, okay, because that's going to be sport specific. Go ahead.
Do you guys do an assessment with all your teams?
What's good about USC, I'll say this first, we are allowed to do philosophically what we want. Okay, so do I utilize the FMS? Yes. With baseball, the full FMS, some of the movements in sand volleyball, track, I did not screen. Okay, so as far as a screening perspective goes, football gets screened. So most of the sports do. Okay, I guess if that answers your question. Okay.
Was it because of the sheer volume in the track is why you didn't screen?
Yes. So as like Coach said in the beginning, I get 50 track guys in the beginning of the year. Am I going to screen? Because that's when I happen to screen. Am I going to screen those guys, when half of them are going to be gone, literally, So, and I think a big part of that too is by the time half of those guys are gone, a lot of our training has taken care of what we would have done in the screen and then correct us from there, okay? Because we talk about, maybe you've heard or, read some stuff into the FMS. A lot of people conceptually say, well, good training is going to take care of your correctives, okay? Which, whatever you believe, if that's what you believe, fine. But I think sometimes it does. So with track, are we going to do still mobility and stability work that kind of corrected them for the most part? Yeah. So by the time we got to that point, we had our 30 kids, we're pretty much good to go. After that, we are maintaining both qualities after it is determined that proficiency has been attained. How do we know if proficiency has been attained? We understand ranges of motion. Anatomically, we understand things. Kinesthetically, joint by joint approach, joint centration. So do you have that knowledge? Can you wrap your head around that concept to know when that athlete's ready to go? Okay, so from an assessment standpoint, strategy must be individualized, right? That's why we're assessing. We're going to give that athlete a program because it's individualized for that athlete. Now, some people get a little scared when we talk about individualization of a program. Okay, we're going to have 50 different programs coming around, and that's not the case. Okay, you have 2 or 3 things on the day that maybe the group is, there's going to be 2 or 3 different programs. You're going to have 3 different groups, maybe. Okay, it is relatively an easy thing to change a couple things in your program to make it individualized. All right, and that's what we want to do with our assessment. Periodization. We want to move to from isolation to conjunction, simple to complex. Mobilization prior to stabilization. Okay, so just as we do with our lifting and our strength and power programs, okay, we want to progress in a similar fashion with mobility and stability. Okay, so I might assess an athlete and say, you have an issue with hip mobility. So I isolate the hip, and then at some point in time, once they're ready, we move into maybe some sort of a lunging motion to integrate that hip, with another joint. Okay, so with that mobility in the hip, now can that athlete control that movement? All right. Timing, off-season versus in-season. Know when to develop and know when to maintain. Okay, so I'm going to develop mobility for a certain amount of time. I'm then going to start developing stability. Okay, so by the time the season comes around, that joint is in a good position. Okay, or that athlete from a movement perspective is ready to go. I can't be in season with one of my pitchers saying, hey, we got to continue to develop your mobility and your mobility only before you're about to start the next day, right? Okay, so there has to be both, and we're maintaining throughout the season. All right, so we want to constantly assess progress or lack thereof. All right, we're using the movements that we utilize in the assessments as your benchmark. Okay, we keep going back, as an example, keep going back to the squat pattern. Keep going back to that after certain progress is made, all right? And what we want to think about when we get into the squat pattern, does the athlete have a mobility issue or simply a lack of education related to the movement, okay? Sometimes an athlete can come in, you say squat down. All right, they don't know how to squat. So does it look bad? Yeah. Okay, but it's simply because they didn't know what the squat was. Okay, they didn't know how to perform that movement. Cue them up a little bit, see if that cleans up the pattern. Can the pattern be fixed in a way that isolates the issue at hand? Okay, we'll go through the next video will be quick fixes for the squat. Okay, can you apply some of these quick fixes that tricks their body into cleaning up the pattern? All right, then we know what the issue is. Does the mobility stability protocol currently on reflect the issue? So when we go back to that squat pattern with the athlete, is there no improvement? Reassess that mobility stability program that they are on, okay? We may be doing the wrong exercise. We may be targeting the wrong joint, okay? So that's why we always want to assess the progress or lack thereof. Okay, so I like this quote by Gray Cook at the end. All right, corrective strategy when practiced by an expert is a temporary sidetrack, not a 6-month program. Okay, so don't be intimidated by these corrective exercises. Apply them for a week and then retest. You could then probably get rid of that exercise and progress that athlete the next week, okay? So we really don't, there's not too much individualization. There's not a million programs going on, okay? We're just saying we're gonna get you on this, we're gonna see where you're at in a week, and then we'll get you on the next exercise, okay? So the squat pattern example here, or quick fixes. Okay, examples again, like I did with the push-up, exercises that we use, okay, that will allow maybe for cleaning up of specifically the squat pattern. Okay, goblet squat with anterior reach. So what am I doing? It's a reactive neuromuscular training type of exercise. I'm telling the athlete, all right, I'm going to load you anteriorly. What is your reaction? Okay, your body's reaction is, to counteract that from a center of gravity standpoint, I have to sit back. I have to, utilize that hip hinge to get into the squat, maybe that they didn't know about before. Then when you get to the bottom of your range, whatever it is, reach forward with that kettlebell. All right, now that intensity is further away from the body. What does my body react? It creates a neurological pattern that may not have been there before. Maybe it cleans up the squat, okay? So, it's not a mobility issue. It's not a hip, ankle mobility issue, all right? Because I'm down there. I'm in that squat pattern, okay? It's simply an activation issue that we have to work on with the athlete. So maybe we do a couple rounds of this as their warm-up before they get into the squat. It educates them neurologically on the pattern. Once they get into a barbell front squat or a heavier goblet squat, it cleans up the pattern. They know how to do the movement now, okay? All right, so the next movement, heels elevated, or squat with heel lift, all right? I've taken out the limiting factor of ankle mobility. Cleaned up the pattern, what's the issue? Ankle mobility, okay? I get them on an ankle mobility program. Squat with valgus RMT. Telling that athlete, all right, put the band around your knees, don't let the band take your knee in. Cleans up the pattern. They squat, maybe they get their depth this time. It was simply an education of the movement, activating glutes. Okay, one of my favorite ones here. I use this all the time. This is squat with flexion RMT. All right, wrap that band around your torso. Cue the athlete. Do not let the band take you forward. All right.
What's RMT?
Reactive neuromuscular training. Okay, so that's a part of the functional movement screen. One of the, I want to say, microcycles, I guess, of the functional movement screen. So we're going to mobilize, and then we're going to utilize reactive neuromuscular training sometimes to fix a movement. So if a knee is caving in on a lunge or a split squat, we will use reactive neuromuscular training with maybe a band trying to pull that knee in, and what's your reaction? You then have to pull against the band, okay? You now know how to activate the right musculature to get you in a good position, okay? So for this one, a big part of what I cue in the beginning is breathing, okay? I need you to set your core. I need to set your joints in a neutral position, all right? So with that band around, they set the good position. I cue them into it, take a deep breath in, okay? They drop down into the squat. A lot of times it'll clean up the pattern, all right? Are they going to necessarily be able to squat with a bar on their back or on the front after that? No, but this is a part of now the program that they might use when they come in as a part of their stability program, okay? As a part of their dynamic stability program, all right? Again, talking about joint centration. I think that's
Question on the breathing.
Sure.
Just curious because you mentioned it earlier. So with the diagram breathing, are you getting them to hold throughout the whole range and breathe out at the top of all the movements?
Right, so in a lot of the movements, so say I would do a paylock press, okay? We know what a paylock press is. We got a cable column, okay, or a band. We press out, okay, that band is pulling you in. I want to stabilize. I may cue that movement or program that movement to be a 3-second hold. So why I want that 3-second hold, I'm going to cue that athlete to press out, take one deep breath in, out, then move your hands towards your chest. That's one rep, okay? So the purpose of that 3-second hold was to train their breathing. So then when we get into a front squat or we get into a deadlift setup, okay, they know how to breathe, set their position, okay? They have that big breath in, they have their stability, and then as they come up, we breathe out. Okay, squat as they go down, we're breathing in diaphragmatically, okay? They're stable in the right position in that front because they know how to do it from our performance prep. As they press up, they breathe out, okay? So we train that in the performance prep, so hopefully conceptually they understand it when they get in to the heavy hitter movements. Okay, so as a screen example, okay, again, I'm going to use a functional movement screen. Whatever you feel about it, if you like it, you don't like it, that's fine. Okay, hopefully you've come up with your own assessment. You should. If you don't utilize, the functional movement screen, you should just utilize something. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to identify the corrective pattern. Okay, so this is going to follow kind of how the theme of the presentation up till now, all right? We want to mobilize first, static motor control, dynamic motor control. What does that remind you of? Joint centration, right? So we're in good positions, we're controlling those positions. And then your performance capacity. Okay, so before you even get into performance capacity, before you even get into throwing around weight, you have to do 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So, therefore, mobility before stability, stability before movement, movement before strength. Okay, and that's going to turn into, in the season, mobility and stability, stability and movement, movement and strength. Okay, we all have to work in conjunction, have that all working together. Okay, so an example. All right, got a hip mobility issue. All right, here's split kneeling hip mob number 1. All right, I stole this exercise from Eric Cressy. All right, I do baseball at University of Southern California as well. He is a great, great baseball resource. Look into his stuff. All right, but so maybe the exercise is something you already know, but how are we carrying it out? Okay, I could dive into that movement. All right, just tell the athlete to reach, and posturally their integrity could fail. Okay, so I'm telling you, with my athletes, every time we do this exercise, it's heavily cued. Okay, because as they move forward, a lot of times that lumbar spine is going to hyperextend, okay, because they're going further into the range of motion, their hips are extended, okay, they don't set their core position. Okay, this one, I have the hand in front, I have the hand in front of the knee to set a good position. I'm breathing correctly. Okay, what do we notice about left foot? Little things, okay, to start cueing your athletes. Where's that left foot at? What's that left foot doing to my hip? Externally rotating, right? Okay? So it's like we know anatomically, like kinesiology, we know this stuff, all right? Apply it to your movements, all right? It's a small thing, all right? And are your athletes going to roll your eyes a couple times? No doubt. But I'm still going to let them squat and put their music on as loud as I can and get after it for the next 40 minutes or 50 minutes, okay? So externally rotate, cue them to put that foot in that position, and then mobilize, okay? Cue them up, Okay, so next exercise. All right, now mobilize. All right, now I need some stability, right? Okay, so I have the ability to dissociate now because I utilize my hip mobility exercises. Okay, so I can get into that half kneeling position without any unwanted movement from a lumbar spine or thoracic spine or whatever. Okay, now in that position, can I stabilize? Can I chop across with that resistance? Can I hold? Can I take a breath? And then can I move back? All right? Now that I've got that down, mobility, hammered away mobility, hammer away stability, now I can move. All right, so the first progression of my movement, I'm going to feel out that position. Statically control, right, from our joint centration talk. And I statically control that movement. Utilization of isometrics. Once they know how to do that, can I move? All right, can I go through some sort of lunge progression? In this one, we happen to be doing a lunge with a reach. These certain reaches, another kind of shout out to somebody, but look up Gary Gray, who is a physical therapist as well. Gary Gray does a lot of stuff with movement and reaching to increase activation patterns. Next example of mobility, I hope. Okay, ankle mob, half kneeling, all right? Take a guess at what we're preparing this athlete for. Call myself an athlete, like I'm actually an athlete. If I turn the camera to the front, all right, and I'm looking at this athlete and I'm working on ankle mobility, what's the first guess of what my strength movement is going to be? We already went through lunging, so don't say anything lunge. Squat, right? Okay, I'm going for that front squat. All right, so we need ankle mobility. All right, so I'm going to cue that athlete not just to press that knee forward, but press it forward over their pinky toe. So it's slightly outward. Okay, so if I had that camera straight on, you would see that knee pushing over the pinky toe. Okay, posturally I'm stable, I'm locked in, then I mobilize. So I'm mobilizing again in a good position. Stability. Okay, we go into front plank series. Okay, so we got our mobility. We're working on our stability body weight wise. I'm breathing over that plank. Okay, diaphragmatically breathing over that plank. All right, next, movement. Okay, cook squat. Some people call it a palm squat. Okay, whatever you call it, learn how to hinge at the hip from a body weight standpoint. Learn how to flex at the knee, hip, and ankle. Exhibiting thoracic spine mobility. Stand up. All right, so if I can do all those things and it looks good, now I'm ready for that front squat. Okay, throw a barbell on, let's start working on strength. Because you're ready for it. Because you've done mobility. You've done stability, you've owned your movement, now you're ready for strength development. Okay, so performance prep. We have limitation to strength coaches. Volume athletes high. Okay, big thing is our certification does not allow for ability to perform hands-on manual therapy. Okay, most bang for your buck, right, is putting your hands on an athlete. Okay, soft tissue work, okay, massage, whatever it is. Okay, ATs take care of that, right? Hopefully. Okay, if you have ATs, but in the private sector, I'll tell you, massage certification, that'd be pretty valuable for you. Okay, so we don't have that certification as strength coaches, all right, in time, all right? So we have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe we have less than 10 minutes for that warm-up, right? So develop your warm-up accordingly. We only have 1, 2, 3 exercises. Go ahead.
Do you guys utilize foam rolls? And
Yeah,
softballs?
so exactly. So that's what we have to do, right? We have to think of things that the athlete can do on their own. Think of massage or mobility and stability work that they can do on their own without me touching them, all right? Can I put my hands on the athlete to kind of promote certain activation of a muscle? Okay, I think that's a valuable thing. Okay, I think that works pretty well. Okay, but from a foam roll standpoint, from tiger tails, plantar fascia tools, all that stuff. All right, so the biggest thing, and what I wholeheartedly believe, is that the majority of your mobility and stability program should be carried out during the performance prep. So if we're trying to carry out our mobility and stability program, a lot of us work in like the A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3 sort of format. All right. So I think a popular thing is to do what? Go A2, A3 as maybe your A2 is your mobility, A3 is your stability exercise for the day, and your A1 is a hang clean, bench press, or a squat. All right. So we're telling this athlete to do coaching intensive exercise, an Olympic lift, then pair it with a coaching intensive exercise in their mobility and a coaching intensive exercise in their stability work. Okay. If you're only one coach, it's going to be hard to coach all those movements up. So we have my athlete say, hey, here's 90 kilos, slam that for 3 reps, all right, and intensity is high, we're yelling at each other, they're on the platform, then I'm about to coach the next guy and I say, hey, go do your cook squat and go do your plank. All right, next guy, 100 kilos. Okay, so what's he doing over there? He's rushing through that A2, A3 so he can get back to his boys, okay, and hit that hang clean again, all right? So it may work for you. You may do it, as part of A2, A3, but as far as, how it has worked for me, especially being one coach, okay, if you have 5, 6 coaches, maybe it works, all right? But I think the best thing to do is when you can see all your athletes, you can coach them up. Their focus is only on mobility and stability, and it's not on getting back to do their hang clean or getting back to do their squat, okay? Group athletes based on the coach-to-athlete ratio. All right, if I'm one coach, I have to group them accordingly. If I have 3 coaches, maybe I have 3 groups, okay? Control the movement by using tempos or cadences. Big thing that I do in my warm-ups is everything has a tempo, okay? So if we go into that split kneeling hip mode, okay, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Or on the whistle, we flex on the whistle, okay, squat down on the whistle, hold, extend on the whistle, okay? Everything is on some sort of tempo so we can control it, right? Okay, we can assess what's going on a little bit easier if I'm controlling the environment. Be willing to devote more time to this portion of the training if necessary, okay? So in my hierarchy of importance, okay, this is probably number 1, all right? Do I want to get after it with squats and cleans and speed work and all that sort of stuff and conditioning and strongman sessions and all that? No doubt about it, okay? But as far as importance, it's number 1, so they can have success in all those subsequent movements, okay? So be willing to spend some more time on it. Knock a couple sets off at the end of their curls or their skull crushers, okay? Spend some more time on this. All right, so real quick, we've already touched on this. It's a warm-up as well. Okay, make sure that in your mobility and stability work or as part of some of your dynamic work before maybe you get into your dynamic warm-up as well, we're activated. If we're hitting sprint work, what do we have? Glute hamstring activation. We're working on our hip dissociation and core stability. Okay, so our mobility and stability program should kind of adhere to what we're doing during the day. So am I going to do a scap wall slide and an IYT before I get into my squat? No, I want to include something that's going to help their squat. Okay, so develop that program accordingly. All right, so the last slides I'm going to go through are just an example of what I'm going to do from, if I have 15 minutes, if I have a long warm-up, if I have that time, the exercises that I'm going to include, okay? And some of them we've already seen. All right, so ankle mode. I start with the ankle mode. I'm starting at what? The bottom of the kinetic chain. I'm going to move up. Isolation of the ankle joint, sagittal plane mobility, okay? It's a hugely important piece of the kinetic chain, so we avoid problems up the chain. It starts at that ankle, all right? Split kneeling hip mode number 1. Isolate the joint articulation, okay? Acetabulum of the pelvis and the femoral head. Sagittal plane mobility, all right? Lumbar stability demonstrated, okay? So cue that lumbar stability. Number 2, which we already saw. Again, very similar. So we've gone through ankle mob, 2 hip mobs in 2 different planes, T-spine extension, highly coaching intensive exercise. Okay, I'm moving up the chain, right? I'm working on my T-spine mobilization now. All right, I dive into that movement. Now, what does the end of that movement look like? Where am I at the end of this movement? Is that thoracic spine extension? Yes, right? Okay, it's not hyperextension. There's not an arch there, right? So when we cue our athletes to get into good posture, it's not a hyperextension, it's not an arch. Okay, I'm in neutral, all right? We're trying to work that movement into a neutral thoracic spine. Sideline T-spine. T-spine again, transverse plane. Okay, we've probably seen this one before, right, most of you? All right, so sometimes we don't take the time to grab those foam rollers, right? We just say knee on the ground, keep your head in a neutral position. You see athletes like this, okay? Mobilize, stabilize in a good position, okay? A part of your joint centration, conceptually, all that. Break out those foam rollers, okay? Get the athlete in a good position. Quadruped T-spine rotation. Quadruped position, again, a part of a closed chain exercise as I talked before. I'm stabilizing one side, hand behind my low back. What's happening? Working internal rotation, working thoracic spine mobilization with a stable lumbar. Left side, my scaps are a mess, but left side should be protracted, okay? Quadruped T-spine rotation. All those years just benching and golds, just getting it done. All right, scap ball slide. My bench used to be huge. Not anymore. Scap wall slides. Okay, scap wall slide in a Y, all right? I'll do the scap wall slide seated so they can feel where their low back, where their upper back, where their head, where their shoulder, elbow, and wrist should be in contact with the wall. All right, we slide down and up. Can you exhibit that mobility? And then into the Y. Okay, what do I want to keep against the wall, especially that lumbar spine? Okay, we're not seeing an arch. That's that kind of self-limiting exercise, right? If you feel yourself move away from the wall, you got to stop. All right, so make sure I can do this before I go into a push jerk or a push press, because if you can't do that and you go into overhead press and you see your athlete do this, okay, are you going to accept that? It goes back to kind of that deadlift example, all right? Are you going to sit there as a coach and say, all right, good, posture looks good? No. Okay, get them on that scap wall slide. Figure out something else for them to do. Quadruped IYT. All right, activation and stability once again. A lot of stuff in the quadruped position. Okay, left side is stable. There's your I, okay, Y, and then T. What am I doing? I'm trying to activate that shoulder complex. I'm trying to activate my sits muscle. Important to stabilize that shoulder. Important for that scapulothoracic interaction to be controlled. Okay, and then finally our core, just an example of some core work that we'll do. Okay, we hit our mobility stuff, we move on to the platforms. It happens to be where our TRXs are. Okay, hit your TRXs, TRX body saw. Challenging movement. You got to hammer away some body weight planks and some side planks before we can do this, right? But I'm trying to protract as much as I can. Small amount of movement. I'm not letting my lumbar spine come into play in that exercise. I'm not creating false stability. I'm breathing. I'm in spinal neutrality. Okay, TRX running. Push-up position now. Activating as much as I can, protracting as much as I can. Lumbar spine stable, thoracic stable. What else can I do here? I can dissociate now because I went through my mobility work. Okay, I have hip mobility. I can drive that knee up to my chest without drawing movement from any other area. TRX skier. Again, push-up position. There's that dynamic stabilization as we talked about with joint centration. Do I have the mobility for it? Do I have the stability throughout that entire movement? Okay. Last one, TRX pike. Pike, push-up position again. We flex at the hip. I control the way down. Again, a movement that's challenging. Okay, I don't have my freshman athletes doing a TRX pike. All right, they're in their body weight plank. They hammer that away. They get their hip mobility work in. They get their push-up planks in, and now they can do that movement. Okay, summary. All right, so what we want to do, use your assessments. Include exercises that coincide with the joint-by-joint approach. Memorize that, know that, use that as your reference. Coach position, not range of motion or maximum time under tension. I don't say, hold this plank for 8 minutes. Okay, I say hold the plank until you're in a bad position, all right? And then I take them out of the exercise. Remember, mobility and stability must coexist to have success, talking about joint centration. Consistently retest to progress your program accordingly. and utilize performance prep for mobility stability programs to allow for the utmost coaching intensiveness. Okay? Now, before we leave, okay, as a strength coach, when you get a chance to, you definitely want to thank the people that have helped you out along the way. Okay, and especially since this is being filmed, I want to give these people a shout out. I went to University of Connecticut where I found strength and conditioning. Okay, I'm from Connecticut. I was a pharmacy major to begin. Okay, and then I got into, I don't know why, make $100,000 at school. Then I got into exercise science, kinesiology. University of Connecticut has one of the best kinesiology departments in the country. I just happened to be at that school, and I just happened to like working out, so I dove into that program. I live 20 minutes away from Springfield College in Massachusetts. Okay, Springfield College has one of the only master's programs with a track in strength and conditioning. Okay, 20 minutes from that school, went to that school for grad school, so I was very, very lucky to be in that area. Okay, and then a big thanks, of course, to University of Southern California strength and conditioning staff. Okay, Aaron Osmus, who hired me. Okay, the absolute best as far as leading and directing a department. Okay, it's a pleasure to work for him. Tim Karen, who's actually a good friend of mine, who is also from Enfield, Connecticut. Okay, he's the one who got me out here. He's the one who got me to intern out here, allowed me to have a job out here. So he's a big part of why this presentation occurred and the knowledge that I have. And the rest of the staff, Tim Ojeda, Darren Musson, Mark Phillips, Kelly Dormady, also a Springfield grad, and Tatiana Abukova. And then our physical therapist, who was a big part of this presentation, Drew Marcos. He's the man, ton of knowledge. So just want to give those guys a shout out. And then, big social networking guy. Go to my website, Chase Performance Training, okay, performancetraininghq.com. Follow me on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at Coach C Chase. My Twitter follower game is terrible, so if anything, please do that. Okay. So, any questions? Something, anything. Yeah, go ahead, throw it out.
I've actually been to your page before, and one of your blogs, you talk about ways of becoming a better strength coach.
Sure.
Have a thing, like a niche.
Yeah.
Is this your thing, or if not, like what's your thing?
Great question. Well, I guess not. I think I read about that too. Like, not trying to pigeonhole yourself as a strength coach into one thing. Like, there's a lot of guys who are speed guys, okay, and they speak a lot about speed. But I think, if they own a private sector facility, they have to do everything, right? They might just be sort of a speed guru, but definitely have a knowledge base that is specific to a certain area, so you can draw people in. Okay, if you're the speed guy, people are going to call you because you're the speed guy. Okay, if you are the basketball training guy, and when I was at University of Rhode Island, they wanted to bring somebody in for women's basketball because they said, I want you to look at their program. Okay, they wanted to bring in some woman who just happened to be the women's basketball person. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know. But because they build themselves up and marketed themselves, that was a prospective thing that they wanted to do. Okay, did she have anything that'll wow you? No, but she just happened to be the basketball person. But I think the most valuable thing is if you are the person in the private sector who does massage or does manual therapy, okay? Get yourself a certification, okay? A useful certification. I have CSCS, okay? That supposedly makes me a strength and conditioning specialist, okay? But if I complement that with an LMT, a licensed massage therapy, okay? If I complement that with maybe a kettlebell certification or whatever, okay? That kind of, from a resume standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, if you're in the private sector, you can kind of push that out to the masses and you're going to be an attractive, person to be able to train with, whatever. People are going to call you because I want to learn about kettlebells or, I need to get my speed up, So I think that's what I meant by, finding that niche, but I think you have to be well-versed. Like, I never wanted to be the football guy, okay? Not that I did football at University of Rhode Island. I was a football strength coach at Springfield College when I was in grad school. Okay, but I never wanted to be billed as the football guy because I wanted to be billed as a strength and conditioning coach. Okay, and on my website, what it says is kind of the mission statement of, the idea of throw an athlete at me, no matter what sport, no matter what situation, and I will be able to assess that athlete and give them a program that coincides with what they want to do for their sport. Okay, so I think that's the essence of strength and conditioning. Okay, not being that one guy, but maybe you are good at something in particular, but you're able to do everything. Anything else? Perfect. Thanks, guys. Appreciate all this.